Iran's foreign minister says talks on reaching a comprehensive deal on Tehran's nuclear energy program should result in the total removal of all anti-Iran sanctions.
God willing, on February 18, we'll enter serious talks on a final solution, and an unforgettable part of the final solution is the removal of all sanctions. If someone talks of continuing negotiations while sanctions are preserved, it's wrong. The removal of all sanctions should be the result of negotiations.
Zarif says U.S.-led sanctions were both illegal and counterproductive from the very beginning and did nothing to help resolve the problem. Zarif says sanctions made it difficult for Iranian companies to purchase even food and medical items and intensified pessimism among the Iranian people. The Iranian foreign minister, who was holding a press conference with his Swedish counterpart Carl Bildt, called on the U.S. government to change its approach. Zarif says Washington's policy of putting pressure on Iran will bring about no result. For his part, Bildt voiced Sweden's support for finding a final and comprehensive solution to Iran's nuclear energy program. He said the issue can be solved if both sides act in goodwill. Let's bring in Mohammad Marandi. He's the professor at the University of Tehran who joins us on the phone to share his thoughts on this. Mohammad Marandi, if we want to go back to when these U.S.-led sanctions were imposed, didn't you find it very surprising that the companies in Europe in particular actually followed through with these sanctions, which in essence hurt their economy? And if you compare that now with the enthusiasm that we're seeing from many of these countries, such as Sweden, such as France, with the delegations, in particular France, coming to Iran wanting to open up trade ties. What's your view on that?
Well, I think it shows that the European Union is a much weaker entity than it was a decade or so ago. The fact that the EU went against its own interests and obeyed American demands and imposed sanctions, hurting itself, as you rightly pointed out, is something that Europeans, as far as I understand, are themselves angry about. The strikes in France that were related to the automobile industry were partially as a result of the sanctions that were imposed on Iran. But I think the important thing that we see is that the United States is coming under increasing pressure because of this changing situation in the region. The economic crisis in Europe is making Europeans eager to find any new market, and Iran is an enormous market, especially as the rest of the region seems to be moving towards collapse in some cases.
And do you think that, given the fact that this is an interim nuclear deal, and that the final one roughly in 6 months' time is going to be signed, that we find somewhat of a new formation in terms of the E3+3, in terms of the European countries applying pressure on the U.S. in order to not put additional sanctions on Iran in hopes of obviously coming out with a final deal to be signed?
Personally, I'm not very optimistic about a final deal at this stage because from what I see, the United States is so far unwilling to come to terms with the reality on the ground in Iran. The United States, according to think tanks and statements made by people in the United States and so-called Iran experts over there, they seem to be under the delusion that President Rouhani is saying one thing, in that Iran demands its rights within the framework of the NPT to be recognized, but at the same time they think that President Rouhani is somehow going to capitulate to American demands. And I think that shows that the United States is miscalculating. President Rouhani, I think he has to be seen in a very different light. When he says that the Iranians will not halt nuclear enrichment, when the Iranians demand that all their rights within an NPT be recognized, I think he's definitely serious, and that's what public opinion in Iran also calls for, and that's what all the major political figures in the country demand. So if the United States continues to pursue this delusional policy, I don't think we're going to achieve a comprehensive deal. But whether we do get there or not, the point really is that the U.S. position is already weakening. Europe, which is very closely aligned to the United States, obviously does not want sanctions, and the rest of the world is moving further away from the United States, especially as power is moving towards Asia every year. The balance of power is changing away from Europe and the United States. So I think in the long run, by behaving, if the United States comes to an agreement, so much the better. If it does not, I think gradually the American influence over the sanctions regime and the ability to maintain the sanctions regime will decrease.
Very well, thank you very much for that. Mohammed Marandi, professor at the University of Tehran, talking to us there on the phone.